All right. So hello friends, I'm Beej again. I'm sorry that you have to see my ugly mug so often, but hopefully I'm giving you some good stuff. So today we'll talk about what they don't tell you about tech interviews. Um, so quick. I was looking at the wrong thing. So quick disclaimer. Oh, I needed to update the slide. So this is not multiple people presenting. This is a combination of my personal knowledge along with some additional research, but not so much actually. I have not written a book on this. I am not an expert. This is just my experience along. Jay, can you check on Yuhi? Can you check on Yuhi? Thank you. But I am a hiring manager, so I have some perspective on this. So yeah, that's kind of the disclaimer. So today there's a lot of stuff. We are going to take the full 30 minutes, but we should not go a minute over. I hope maybe we'll see. We'll talk about, how do you get the interview in the first place? Cool, thank you. We'll talk about the different types of interviews that you can encounter, which is not a complete comprehensive list, just some of the most common ones. We'll talk about how to think from the manager's perspective, what the manager is trying to figure out during interviews. We'll talk about what you can do to prepare for interviews, how to give the right answer, even if you don't have it, and how to give the right questions, because that's arguably more important. And lastly, some secret weapons I can give you. So it should be fun. Huh? Yeah, secret weapons. It's totally not marketing. Anyway. So first off, getting the interview is basically just resume or CV, curriculum vitae writing. There's just some key things that you want to keep in mind. First off, as easy to read as possible. Now in Korea, that may not always be perfect. There is a standard resume format in Korea. It sucks. It's terrible. However, some companies require that format, in which case yeah, don't apply for those companies is good advice. But so try to make your resume as easy to read as possible. What does this mean? This means don't have it just be one giant wall of text. Leave some white space. Try to keep it organized. Think about the order in which the hiring manager will want to learn information about you, okay? Also, no typos. I have met other managers where if they see a typo, they immediately throw out the resume. Check your stuff. Use spell check. Ask a friend. The thinking is that if you put so little effort into your resume to make sure that it's correct and you fail at that, then you're not going to do a good job at work. And that's a viable thought in some people's view. For ease of the manager's reading, do include dates and the duration of your work experience or projects. Yes, both, please. Just so that we know like how long ago that you worked on this thing, so we know how much we can ask you about it, and also how long you worked with it, so we can get an idea of your depth of knowledge, okay? Sorry, let me just adjust something here briefly. Okay, we're good. And then a lot of people, even if they have like 10 years of experience, they put their education at the top of the resume. Don't do that. If you have like more than 2 or 3 years of job experience, I don't care where you went to school. I care about the work you've done. And most modern progressive managers will think like that. And the ones who don't, you might not want to work for anyway. But there's more. So some managers don't like when you just include a list of your skills on the thing because they don't know how much time did you spend with that skill, how deep is your skill, this kind of stuff. But I argue that you should still include an explicit list of the skills you have. Why? Because a manager, a human, is not the only one reading your resume. Often people grab resumes and just post them online, or if you put it on your LinkedIn or whatever. By the way, hint, hint, you should have a LinkedIn, and your LinkedIn should basically be a copy of your resume. And machines are also checking your resume. So, for example, one of the machine learning reader things we use basically pulls out your experience, how long you've been at various companies, pulls out some keywords, and it does that all automatically. So make sure that your stuff is good enough for a machine to parse. Also, if you can include just like a one-sentence thing about the kind of company that it was that you worked at in the past or the kind of products they build, that can be helpful. For example, we have had times where, you know, they have a whole bunch of like interesting experience about, but it's all kind of soft skills. And then they come to interview and it's like they didn't do software engineering. They did like industrial manufacturing engineering. But I didn't have time to go check the company. I just checked their experience and then I was like, oh, we just wasted an hour of you coming over here. So do include a tiny bit of info about the companies. It doesn't need to be a whole lot because you have limited space on your resume, but it can help. It provides context for your experience. And now this one is a big key one. If you do this one tip, you will be way ahead of most applicants. There is an ideal way to describe your experience at past companies. It is accomplished some business goal by some action using some technology. And that business goal, if you can find it or guess at it, includes some kind of metric. One example being, if you're a front-end or if you're like a DevOps person or something, you can say, I improved the page load time by 60% by migrating our front-end web server to a content delivery network on Cloudflare. So that shows you're aware of the business impact. You know how your work impacts the business. Hint, hint, that's what a manager cares about. You tell them how you did it, what kind of work you did, and then you tell them what technologies you're experienced in to accomplish that goal. If you do this, I'm like, okay, so when's the interview? Okay? So do this. It's very nice. If you don't have metrics, it's okay. If you do have metrics, or if you can approximate the metrics, that'll take you a long way. Okay? So far, so good? Cool. So that's kind of getting the interview. If you do these kinds of things, that should help you a lot. Now, granted, this does not get you a perfect chance of getting an interview, right? Even candidates who are well qualified still get rejected because maybe the manager wasn't paying attention to your resume properly, or maybe they were just having a bad day or something. There's a lot of randomness in applying for jobs. So when you get rejected, and you will get rejected, don't feel bad. A lot of it is just a dice roll, okay? So, assuming you get the interview, what kind of interviews can you expect to encounter? These are some of the main types of interviews. Again, like I said before, this is not comprehensive, but these are kind of the main categories you can expect to encounter. First is the introductory interview. This is often with a hiring manager, because the hiring manager, his or her team member's time, is very important. They don't want to waste the team member's time with someone who's not a good candidate. So they might interview you first as kind of a screening thing. Alternatively, maybe HR or recruiting could do this introductory interview. In any case, it's usually more relaxed. It involves questions about your experience, what your personal goals might be, why you applied to the company, these kinds of things. Sometimes it may include some technical questions, but they usually won't be too deep, okay? Next is the technical interview or skills interview or competency interview. It goes by many names. And this is checking how you can actually do the job. What skills do you have to accomplish the job? Many people believe this is the toughest. And in some capacity, it is. For many software engineering jobs, they still ask people about data structures and algorithms questions. It's stupid, but they do it because they don't know how better to filter people. Maybe because they're not great at assessing people. But anyway, there is a high chance that you could be asked about data structures and algorithms. So you should spend some amount of studying, some amount of going through problems on LeetCode, as much as we all hate it. But there might be ways to get around it. We'll talk about it later. Another thing is the tech interviews may also check your working style. So they'll ask you, hey, how would you solve this problem, right? And this problem's often ends up being an algorithms problem, but what they really want to do is they want to see how you think. Do you ask people for help? What is your thinking process? So if you end up doing like a whiteboard interview or something, which sounds terrifying, but it's actually an advantage. I would much rather do a whiteboard interview than just an online code test. Because in a whiteboard interview, even if I can't figure out the answer, I can show the interviewer that I can think logically. I can go through the steps, and maybe the manager might give me some hints, right? I can ask questions. I can ask, is there a person who can help me with this? Could I ask them a question like this, right? Because, you know, in the real world, you collaborate. You're not doing everything in isolation, right? But these days, there's a lot of online assessments. Yeah, not great. Next up is behavioral interviews. This is checking how you handle various situations. This is more of the soft skills. So this could be, how do you prioritize work? If you have two customers come to you and they both say, this is the most important thing, you need to do this, how do you choose one, right? Well, the answer is you don't. You ask someone else to do that because your job is not to prioritize. You're a software engineer. Or how do you handle conflict? If you get into a fight with the senior engineer on the team, right? But you absolutely know that your answer is correct. How do you handle that? Or if they give you some kind of feedback, how do you handle that? Or if you need to give someone feedback, how do you deliver that feedback? This is all kind of behavioral interview questions, right? They want to know that working with you will not be a problem. Okay? They want to know that you can communicate well. They want to know that you can take criticism gracefully, that you don't take things personally. It's like, oh, you made a mistake on this thing. Oh, are you saying I'm a terrible engineer? Like, no, man, don't act like that, okay? And last is the culture interview. This is the most variable of types because everyone debates about what culture is. It can be a combination of everything. It can be like an introductory, technical, and behavioral interview all combined. But most often, the common thread among them is they check if you know what the company's values are and if your values match. So for example, I used to work at Riot Games, right? Their mission is to be the most player-focused company in the world. If you don't know that coming into the interview, you will not pass. If you don't know their values going into the interview, you're likely to not pass. Same with Lunit, right? Lunit's mission is to conquer cancer through AI. Had a little bit of a brain dip that should have come out much faster. And the company values are things like work with global DNA, thrive with responsible autonomy, timely craftsmanship on time, talk to each other, right? I can rattle these things off because I'm well versed in the company culture. This is usually stuff you can find on the company website. It takes you 10 minutes, just do it. You just go to the company website, they have like about the company, corporate values, all that kind of stuff. Just spend 5 minutes reading it, try to memorize one or two, that's usually good enough. Definitely know the company mission, if they publish their mission. If they don't publish their mission, they're probably very profit-focused, and be careful. Granted, profit-focused companies are fine, but mission-focused companies tend to be a bit nicer. But there's variety to everything. Okay, so far so good? Cool. So, on to the manager perspective. Why should you care about the manager's perspective? The manager's deciding whether you pass or fail. So you should understand how they think, so you can get them to think well about you. So, this is basically the interview metagame. As you're answering questions, as you're having a conversation with the manager, there's a second conversation going on in the background, okay? This is the kind of metagame. Because as the manager is asking you questions, maybe the manager is asking you a technical question, but he really wants to know, can you answer this in a manner that I can understand you? Can I communicate well with you, right? This is what the manager actually wants to know. Your answer doesn't necessarily need to be 100% correct, right? But you have to deliver it properly, okay? So I need someone who can do the work that I need done, right? That's can you answer the questions, okay? I need someone who's pleasant to work with. If I give them feedback, will they take it personally? Will they treat it as a fight? If I'm wrong about something, will they discuss it with me rather than just call me an idiot, right? I need someone who I can communicate with easily. Can you structure information in a way that is easy to parse, okay? Can you provide context, purpose, and then conclusion? These kinds of things. By the way, nudge, nudge, wink, wink. Julie, one of the organizers, her specialty is communication. You should have a chat with her if you're worried about this. And then I need someone that I don't need to micromanage. Someone who I can give them a goal and they can figure out how to get there. Or the evil twin, someone I can micromanage easily. Someone that I can just say, do this, right? For some people, They want to work like that. They don't want to make decisions. They don't want to take on risk. That is cool, okay? That is a perfectly viable way to work if you're comfortable with that. But you need to figure out what kind of working style the manager wants. And then you need to reflect if that matches your working style, okay? So far, so good. Cool. All right. So next, interview preparation. So you got the interview. The manager reviewed your resume. They were happy with what they saw. Now they want to talk to you. Oh God. This person who is in control of my future wants to talk to me. What do? Don't think like that, okay? That's just going to cause you to panic. First, study the job description, right? You should very, very, very well understand the job description, okay? Because that is the work they will ask you to do. If you don't know what kind of work they want you to do, you won't know how to answer the questions, okay? Learn about the company mission and values. We talked about that already. Ask questions about the interview beforehand, okay? Usually when you're doing like interview scheduling, there's a lot of back and forth, like, oh, I can make this time, I can't make that time. Oh, well, the manager's schedule changed, they can't make it until this time. That's an opportunity. It slows down the process, but it gives you a chance to ask questions. What kind of interview is this? Will I be asked technical questions? Is it a behavioral interview? How many interviewers are there? Is it just the hiring manager, or is it the hiring manager and the team? Is it the hiring manager and their boss? You can ask these things beforehand. They may not always answer, but it doesn't hurt you to ask. And then if it ends up being a technical interview, will there be data structures and algorithms questions? Because then you should know if you should start grinding leak code or not, right? If it's a technical interview, study data structures and algorithms. It sucks, but we got to do it. But if you can ask if it's actually going to be on there, that helps. And if they lie to you, you know you don't want to be there anyway. And then, this might be a bit controversial, but I haven't run into problems with it so far. If you get the names of your interviewers at any point, or if you can figure it out through searching for some stuff, look up the interviewers on LinkedIn. See what kind of work experience they have. Maybe they're like a product manager now, but they were a backend and DevOps engineer before. So you know they're going to ask you technical questions, right? It's worth checking that stuff out. It can give you an advantage to understand how you should answer certain questions, where you can flex. So maybe it's someone who was a business person, and or maybe it was a marketing person, and they transferred into software engineering. Well, then you can talk about how, you know how important conversion is for the business. And so you really make sure that your websites perform properly to make sure users convert. Someone with a marketing background is going to be like, oh, that's good. They understand the business because they understand what I know. So research the interviewers if you can figure out who they are. Did I cover everything? Yeah, that covers it. Questions? We got 10 minutes left and we're doing okay on time. Cool. So next, giving the right answer, okay? Now, as I mentioned briefly before, even if you don't have the knowledge of the correct answer, you can still give a right answer. Sounds counterintuitive, but interviewing is its own skill set. It's its own kind of game. So, first off is framing, okay? This is basically among the communication point, right? So, what kind of product was it that you were working on when you answer a question, right? If they're asking you about your past experience, right? What kind of problem were you trying to solve, right? Keep in mind what the manager is looking for. They want to know that you can get the work done. They want to know it's easy to work with you. They want to know you can communicate. They want to know that they don't need to micromanage you, as we mentioned before. And again, keep in mind the job description. If you can frame your answers in the context of the work that you know you'll need to do, it makes it easier for the manager to connect the dots. Oh, this candidate, they know this kind of question is correlated to this kind of work. They're smart. They can figure this out. Okay? Sometimes you'll be asked a question where you just have no idea what the answer is. It is okay to say, I don't know. Okay? If a manager faults you for saying, I don't know, you probably do not want to work for them. Okay? If you say, I don't know, but I know this, can I tell you about this? Yeah, sure. Why not? I'm here to learn about what you know. You don't know this, that's fine, but you know that, and that might be useful. So offer alternatives. Alternatively, also, do not make up an answer. If you make up an answer, you're done. Okay? Guessing is okay. If you tell them it's a guess, you tell them why you're guessing that. That's totally fine. But if I ask you, hey, if I ask you a very direct factual question, like, hey, what does an HTTP 500 status code mean? And you say, oh, yeah, that's a not found error. Nope, you're done. Okay? Yeah, don't do that. But again, guessing is okay, as long as you make it clear that it's a guess and you explain how you came to that guess. All right? Another thing, and this is one of my favorites, you can try to break the question. So if someone asks you like, oh, how would you prioritize this? Right? And you say, well, is it my job to prioritize? Shouldn't I ask the product owner? Shouldn't I ask you? Right? You can always turn the question back on the interviewer, right? You should kind of treat this like a game, right? But also, you can give unexpected answers, right? And unexpected answers imply some level of cleverness, right? They want to know that you can solve the problem. They don't necessarily care how. They just want the problem solved. So if you can figure out an unexpected but easier way to solve a problem, you win, okay? Also, don't forget, even if you're applying for a technical role, sometimes non-technical answers are effective. For example, maybe we're building data pipelines. We're getting data from some third-party company, and the data they give us the format always changes, right? And how would you build a system to handle this changing format? It's like, why would we build a system for that? Can't we just establish a contract with them where, they give us data in the correct format, and if they don't, we don't pay them? It's like, that is a good idea, and then I don't have to spend any engineering hours on it. Great answer. This kind of stuff, okay? Also, if you're maybe not sure of the answer, but it's kind of related to what you do, maybe you're not understanding the terms they're asking, or maybe you just can't really remember it, you can kind of buy yourself a time or even kind of grab some information. You can ask context about the question. Why exactly do we need to build this system? What is the intended outcome of the system? What systems do you have in place already, right? Asking questions about the problem, asking questions about the question, can help you find the answer. Also, it's just generally good engineering practice. If I say, build me a house, you don't just go, okay. You go, what kind of house? How tall does it need to be? How many rooms does it need to have, right? Why do you need a house built? Is this a vacation house? You ask these questions to help you understand the problem. You can do this with interview questions as well. Now, don't overdo it, right? You don't want to make the manager angry, but kind of make some judgment. Ask questions enough that you can figure out how to solve the problem, okay? Now, for straight factual questions like what is an HTTP 500 status code, you can't do this. But for other kind of broader questions, totally use this, okay? Also consider multiple dimensions, okay? So I mentioned like non-technical solutions, but there's other things to consider too, especially when describing your answer. For example, cost. If we use a cloud system, it might cost more money. Do we have a data center? Or it might cost engineering hours. It might cost in terms of time. How much time do we have to build this? Do you need a fast solution or do you need a good solution? There's also user experience, right? Especially if you're on front end. Are these internal users? Can we be hostile to our users? Which sometimes the answer is yes. Hopefully not, but sometimes. How important is maintainability? Is this something we're going to keep for 10 years or is this a throwaway project? And then, most importantly, what's the deadline? How much time do I have to build this? Right? And then you can answer your question. So for example, they're like, hey, I need the system by tomorrow. You're like, okay, so I'm just going to download something from the internet and throw it on the server. Right? Granted, you want to provide a little more detail because there's dangers around security. Does it actually fit the requirements? All this kind of stuff. But you get the idea. And lastly, adjacent answers can work. So I mentioned earlier, I don't know but this. That's a totally viable strategy, okay? Because I don't know is a good communication method, but you still need to show that you know other stuff. You need to show that you're competent. You need to show that you can solve problems, okay? So you can always give alternative answers. I don't know about solving exactly X problem, but I've solved a similar problem Y. Can I tell you about that? And a reasonable manager will be like, yeah, maybe, or that's not quite similar enough. Do you know of another similar problem? This kind of thing. So far, so good? Cool. Now, a lot of what I'm telling you is for reasonable managers. Not all managers are reasonable. You have to play the game a little bit, okay? So now, this one is one of the more important bits. Ooh, I gotta speed up no, I'm good. Giving the right questions. This is what can take you from an candidate to like, I wanna hire this guy, okay? So basically, act like you've arrived just after being hired and you're trying to figure out everything, right? Like, hey, what's the roadmap? What do you expect me to know in 2 weeks, right? What kind of tech do you use for these systems? What should I go study, right? What kind of difficult problems have you been working on? Maybe I can help you solve these kinds of problems in the future. Or, hey, who's gonna mentor me? Who can I go to ask questions? Or, hey, given what I've told you so far in this interview, is there anything you recommend I go study? That one's really good. Because that shows that, hey, even if this person didn't know the answers to like 3 or 4 of my questions, maybe in a week they'll have the answers. That might be good enough, right? Now, of course, choose the right question for the right interview. For example, don't ask about the tech they're using during a culture fit interview or behavioral interview. That doesn't work. But be smart about it. Try to ask questions that would help you do the job. It is always nice as a hiring manager when the candidate is acting like they're already hired. It sounds a bit presumptuous, but if they approach it from a manner of curiosity, hey, how do you expect me to do this job? Then I know that they're goal focused. They're focused on getting the job and doing cool stuff at this company. That's good. That only works in your favor. All good? All right, so now the secret weapons. Okay? This is my favorite stuff because this is basically hacking the interview. So, breaking the fourth wall. I mentioned earlier, an interview is actually 2 conversations. There's the questions and answers, and then there's the actual questions and answers, right? If you have the awareness to recognize that there's these 2 different conversations going on at the same time, it's basically nunchi, right? And you say, hey, I know you're asking this, I know you're looking for an answer like this because you want to learn this about me, but I don't have an answer. Let me tell you about this because I know this is what you actually want to learn about. The manager's like, oh, hey, you know what? Yeah. Tell me more. Come on, right? Because you basically acknowledged the game of the interview, and you're throwing out the traditional rules in favor of the rules that make sense. Okay, so don't be afraid to like call out how the interview works, and be like, hey, I know you're looking for this. I have that. Let me tell you about it this way. Okay, does that kind of make sense? Alternatively, you can use it to kind of figure out some of the questions. So are you asking me about this experience because you want to know how I worked with the team, or because you want to know about how I think about the problem? And they might say both, but they might say just one, and you can gear your answer that way, okay? Again, kind of understanding what the game of the interview is and just figuring out on those goals rather than the goal of answering the immediate question, okay? Next, and this may not always work, this is something you want to check before the interview, but if you bring notes and then you take notes for the interview, I love this because you can actually make the manager a bit nervous in a good way. And it basically acts like a cheat sheet. For example, you could have the job description in your notes, and then you can just reference it like, oh yeah, he wants to know about this. Oh, let me tell you about that. Or you can have the company mission or the company values in there to remind you, right? And then as the manager is telling you stuff, you can write down like, okay, I need to go study this, I need to go study that, right? Think about it. When you're having a work conversation with someone and they're taking notes, how do you perceive them? They seem organized. They seem like they're motivated. They seem like they're trying to solve the problem. They seem like they're thinking really hard. That's how you want to come across in an interview. So take notes, if it's permitted. always ask permission on this. Because if you start writing down what someone's like, if you're like at a casual coffee chat with a friend and you just start writing stuff down, they're gonna be like, what are you doing? So make sure to check. But if it is allowed, this is a great idea. And the last one, you're an interviewer too. Because as terrifying as it is to talk with someone where their goal is to assess you and judge whether or not you're good enough, you're judging the whole company based on them. And that is just as terrifying, if not more. Like, when I go into an interview, as an interviewer, I'm thinking the whole time, how do I make Lunit not look like a terrible company? It's a great company. How do I show them that, right? And that's a lot more pressure than just like, how do I not look bad, right? I'm representing a whole bunch of people to this person. You can play on that. So you can be like, what is it like working at this company? What's some difficulty you've had? Is there any time where you've been frustrated? And they're like, right? But it also shows that you care about the job. You want to work at a place where you can have a good working life, right? And it can also like, just keep the conversation casual, because then it's like, this is kind of weird, but it's almost like a date. Interviewing is like dating, right? You're meeting someone new, you're getting to know them, you're trying to exchange information about each other to figure out if you're compatible. So treat it like a date. Well, not too much. Don't bring flowers. But be casual, be curious, show your best self. These are things you do when dating. Do this stuff in an interview as well. Okay? So don't, when you get nervous about an interview, when you're like getting the shakes and you're like getting bellies in your stomach and your voice cracks a little bit and you might stutter a little bit, remember, you're an interviewer too. They're the ones who should also be nervous. Okay? So all good, everyone? Cool. So don't forget, tips on getting an interview. Make your resume awesome. Keep in mind the types of interviews. If you can, figure out what type of interview beforehand so you can prepare properly. To prepare properly, you need to understand the manager perspective. Think about the kind of things they're trying to figure out about you. Then prepare for the interview. Collect information about the company. Make sure you understand the job description. Then when giving the right answer, even if you don't have the exact answer, try to give the closest answer, or try to show your communication, or try to show your thought process, okay? And then make sure you ask questions like you're already working at the company. You want to solve the problems they want to solve. You want to help them succeed. And then don't forget the secret weapons. Break the fourth wall. Take notes. You're an interviewer too. All good? Cool. Well, thank you very much for your time. I apologize that we're 3 minutes over, but I hope this helps. And as usual, we'll post the presentation notes and a recording on the internet, or on Discord. Thanks, bye.